Imagine for just 1 second that you become trapped and you're completely alone. All around you, the deafening roars of a factory drowning out your cries for help. And then it happens. Due to circumstances completely out of your control, you realize these are probably going to be your final moments. And no, this isn't some sort of fictional nightmare plucked out from a horror movie. This is, or was, the terrifying reality for a man named Alan Catterall, an extremely dedicated worker whose life was tragically ended due to downright negligence. This is the brutal backstory behind the Piranha Kayak Moldings incident. So back in December of 2010, the then 54-year-old Alan was a seasoned supervisor for Piranha Kayak Moldings Limited, specifically out of their factory located in Runcorn, England. And for a little over a decade, 12 years to be exact, he had been a quiet, steady, and reliable presence at this company, which was well known for making plastic kayaks. As for his family, he was a devoted father of 3, always looking forward to making the very best out of each and every holiday for his children, especially Christmas, which happened to be right around the corner. In addition to this, he was also looking forward to his daughter's upcoming wedding. But on the morning of December 23rd, just 2 days before Christmas, his hard work and dedication to that company, along with a series of critical design choices, would lead to a day no one at Piranha Moldings would ever forget. You see, at the heart of this factory stood one of these giant industrial ovens you're looking at right here. It's important to note, these weren't actually purchased from a manufacturer. As a matter of fact, Piranha had opted to design and build them on their own accord, specifically modeling them to accommodate their molding process. And well, as insignificant as this piece of information may sound, it would later become the catalyst for a very serious issue. Woven right into its design was an extremely fatal flaw. Now essentially the way this worked was there were 2 molds for every one kayak, a top and a bottom. And well, the first part of this process involves adding a powder known as linear polyethylene to said bottom mold. The upper mold is then placed on top, where even more powder is dumped inside through a small hatch. It is at this point a button is pressed, in turn drawing the kayak into the oven. The doors then close automatically and lock from the outside. However, inside of the oven, there was no way to manually override this process. No internal alarm system to signal any sort of distress. And things only continue to get worse. From the control panel, there wasn't a clear line of sight into the oven, meaning, theoretically, an operator could activate this entire process without ever truly knowing if the oven had been cleared out. And so it is. Shortly before 9 a.m. on that fateful morning, the oven popped out an error code, taking it out of service. This was a common occurrence, as quite often you had to get in there and clean up blobs of plastic that had dripped out of the molds. Regardless, the operator, a man by the name of Mark, goes up to Alan and he's like, "Look, I gotta use the bathroom. I've got a mold out here. It's ready to go. I'm in a rush. Is there any way that you can clean this for me before I get back?" With that, Alan grabs a crowbar, walks on into the oven, and starts scraping up all these chunks of plastic. Now, just a short while later, Mark finishes up using the bathroom. He then walks back over to the control panel, and for one reason or another, that code had been cleared out. All leading up to the critical moment he activated the oven while Alan was still inside performing maintenance. The very second that button was pressed, the kayak drew itself into the oven, with the doors closing and locking directly behind it. Alan was now officially sealed inside of this thing, completely trapped. The drones and whirs of the production floor drowning out his cries for help. It was in that very moment Alan likely realized he was going to remain inside of this thing for at least 10 minutes. Just 3 minutes later, that oven has reached temperatures of well over 500 degrees. It wasn't until smoke began billowing out of the top of it that people realized something was wrong. The process then came to a complete halt, and when they opened those doors, the discovery they made was absolutely horrifying. Alan had unfortunately spent his last few moments beating and prying on that door with the crowbar in a desperate attempt to escape. But it was of no use. The doors were simply too thick, and the bar was too wide to be able to jam in between them and gain any sort of leverage. But that's not even where this ends, because this story becomes so much worse when you realize the individual who pressed that button was due to marry Alan's daughter in the near future. Yes, Mark was Alan's future son-in-law. The terrifying discovery of Alan's death launched an immediate joint investigation between the police and the health and safety executives. What they began to uncover wasn't just a single isolated error. It was a devastating series of utter negligence. As a matter of fact, the courts would go on to hear numerous accounts of previous near misses. Workers had apparently been inside these ovens when the doors began closing on them as well. However, luckily, they were able to make it out in time. More so, there was a palpable growing fear among the employees of this exact same scenario becoming a reality. In other words, it wasn't just some unforeseeable incident. It was a disaster begging to happen. Sadly, all of their concerns seemed to fall on deaf ears. In addition to this, they hadn't conducted a proper risk assessment on the procedures of entering or cleaning the oven. Neither of these two tasks had been incorporated into their training program. As for the oven itself, it was designed by the company's own technical director, Peter McArath. He had personally overseen its design without incorporating fundamental safety features. There was no escape hatch, no ability to access the locking mechanism internally, as well as the missing alarm. Piranha Moldings, the company at fault, was found guilty of corporate manslaughter. They were made to pay roughly $200,000 in fines. As for Peter McArath, he received a 9-month suspended prison sentence. This essentially means that if he stayed out of trouble over the course of those 9 months, which he did, he would end up staying out of prison. And while Alan's family, understandably, expressed a slight bit of gratitude over this verdict, it will never truly erase the profound and lasting pain of their loss. Since that day, an escape hatch was made to be placed on each and every one of those ovens. The story of Alan Catterall is one of the many dark and mysterious incidents we will be covering on this channel. So whether you are new here or you've been around since before I took a year off, know that I am back and I am committed to bringing you even more compelling stories in the future. Feel like you learned something new or you just simply enjoy this type of content, consider leaving a like, maybe subscribing, as we have several other videos in the making. As always, stay safe, stay curious, and we will see you on the next one.